I need you to understand something about Bailey before I tell you any of this, because the story doesn't make sense without you understanding who she was first. Bailey was a 6-year-old golden retriever mix who had never once in her life displayed an aggressive bone in her body. I mean that with complete precision. In 6 years, I had never heard her growl at a person, never seen her stiffen at another dog, never watched her react to anything in our home with anything other than the absolute weaponized friendliness that golden retrievers treat as their primary personality setting. Visitors loved her. Children climbed on her. The UPS driver knew her by name and kept treats in his truck specifically for her. She was, by every available measure, the most psychologically uncomplicated creature I have ever shared a living space with. Which is exactly why what happened destroyed me the way it did. Because when the most trusting, most open, most fundamentally gentle animal you have ever known looks at an empty corner of a room and reacts as though something in that corner intends to consume her alive, you cannot file it under overactive animal instincts and go back to your evening. You cannot do that. You feel it. In your body, in your chest, in the oldest and least rational part of your brain that has been quietly maintaining a list of things that human reasoning doesn't fully cover. You feel it the way you feel a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. Something fundamental shifting. My name is Stephanie. I'm 33 years old, and I live in a craftsman bungalow in the Corktown neighborhood of Detroit, Michigan. I bought the house 3 years ago after renting in the city for most of my 20s, and the sense of ownership, of permanence, of a space that was genuinely mine, had given me a satisfaction I can only describe as cellular. I knew every room in that house, every sound it made at night, every draft and every creak and every pipe knock. The house and I had developed a mutual familiarity in 3 years that felt, in the best moments, like a genuine relationship. I knew when it was settling. I knew when the wind was coming from the north because the upstairs bathroom window would develop a faint whistle. I knew the particular sound the furnace made before it fully engaged on cold mornings. I knew that house. I thought I knew everything it contained. The northeast corner of the living room is where it started. The living room in a craftsman bungalow of that era is a specific kind of space. Low ceilings by modern standards, deep baseboards, a fireplace on the south wall with original tile surround, built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, windows on 2 walls letting in whatever light the season was offering. It was the room I spent most of my time in. Comfortable, warm, thoroughly inhabited. On winter evenings, Bailey and I occupied it together in the arrangement we had settled into over years. She on the rug in front of the fireplace, I on the couch with a book or the television low. A room that knew us. The northeast corner was the furthest point in the room from the fireplace. It held a floor lamp and a reading chair I used occasionally, and that was the extent of it. A functional corner, entirely ordinary, receiving the least light of any part of the room because the windows were on the south and west walls, and the northeast simply got what reflected and filtered to it. Slightly dim in the evenings when the lamp was off. Not dark, not shadowed in any dramatic way. Simply the least attended part of an attended room. On a Wednesday evening in late January, Bailey stood up from her spot in front of the fireplace and looked at that corner. I noticed because she stood up quietly, without her usual full-body enthusiasm, without the particular gathering of herself that normally preceded movement toward a toy, or a water bowl, or the kitchen. She simply rose and oriented toward the northeast corner and stood there, looking. I looked at the corner. Empty. Lamp off, reading chair, the pale winter light coming faintly through the window glass, the ordinary geometry of 2 walls meeting at a right angle in the space between them. Bailey's shoulders rose. Not a dramatic hackle display. A subtle elevation of the fur along the top line of her back. A slight squaring of her posture that was so contrary to her usual physical vocabulary that it registered on me immediately. I set down what I was reading and watched her. She took 2 steps toward the corner, stopped, and then from somewhere in her chest, she produced a sound that I had never in 6 years heard her make. A low, continuous growl, not high-pitched, not frantic, not the social vocalization of a dog responding to an unfamiliar noise. This was something from a deeper register entirely. slow and constant, and emanating from the core of her like something being generated by a mechanism rather than a choice. The sound of an animal that has identified a threat and is responding with a seriousness that has bypassed performance and gone straight to the genuine. I called her name. She didn't turn. I called it again, sharply, and she turned her head to look at me for just a moment with an expression I had never seen on her face before and will never forget. Dogs' faces are readable to people who know them. You learn the vocabulary of a specific animal over years until their expressions are as legible as words on a page. What I read on Bailey's face in that moment was not confusion or territorial alertness or the excited tension of play. What I read was a clear, simple, communicative fear, the specific fear of an animal that knows precisely what is wrong and is desperately trying to convey the information across a species barrier to the person beside her. Then she turned back to the corner and kept growling. I got up. I walked to the corner. I stood in it between the lamp and the chair, directly in whatever sightline she was tracking, and I looked at her from the corner's perspective. She watched me cross the room, and her growl changed register as I entered the corner, dropping lower, a sound that felt less like warning and more like grief. And she backed up 2 steps and sat down and looked at me standing in the corner with an expression that in a human being I would have described as horrified. I left the corner. I turned the lamp on. I called Bailey to me, and she came and pressed against my legs with a trembling I could feel through my palms, and we sat on the couch together for the rest of the evening with the lamp on and the television loud, and she did not return to her spot by the fireplace. She stayed pressed against my side with her head on my lap and her eyes, when she thought I wasn't watching, sliding back to that corner. I told myself she had sensed a mouse in the wall. I told myself something in the neighborhood, a sound frequency too high for human hearing, had activated an instinct. I deployed every reasonable explanation I had, and I went to bed, and I slept adequately, and I woke up the next morning, and the corner was a corner, and Bailey ate her breakfast with her usual enthusiasm, and I was nearly, almost convinced. She did it again the following evening. Same corner, same time approximately, same rising of the back fur, same low register continuous growl, same 2-step advance and stop. This time she did it for 40 minutes. I timed it. 40 minutes of standing in the living room facing that corner and growling with the mechanical consistency of something that had no option but to continue. I checked the walls for sounds. I checked the corner structurally. I pulled the reading chair away from the wall and examined the baseboard and the floor junction. I turned on every light in the room. I moved objects. I tapped on the wall. I examined the lamp base for interference. Nothing. The corner was a corner. Bailey growled for 40 minutes and then abruptly stopped, turned away, and walked to the kitchen for a drink of water as though nothing had occurred. By the 5th consecutive evening, I had stopped looking for explanations and started simply watching her. Because watching her was more informative than any investigation I could conduct. She had developed a specific relationship with that corner that was consistent and detailed in its behavior. She would not approach within 4 feet of it. When she growled, she positioned herself at exactly that distance, not closer, not further. When I entered the corner, she reacted with that same horrified urgency, but never with aggression toward me, always pulling me away, always trying to communicate something directional. Come away from there. Come away from it. Come back to where I am. On the 8th night, she stopped growling. She stood at her 4-foot distance and she looked at the corner for a very long time in absolute silence. No growl, no raised fur, just looking. And then she sat down. And then, slowly, she looked at me and held eye contact with me for a duration and with an intensity that was so thoroughly unlike casual dog attention that I felt it as a communication. Not a translation I could make exact, but something that carried the weight of information. Something important has changed. Something I need you to understand. I looked at the corner. I had looked at that corner every evening for 8 days. I knew its dimensions, its shadows, its exact color gradients in every lighting configuration. I had looked at it in daylight and lamplight and the orange glow of the fireplace and the flat overhead light. I looked at it now. And for just a moment, Just one moment that lasted no longer than a breath, and that I have examined from every angle in the 8 months since, and have never been able to deconstruct or dismantle or explain away. For just that moment, the shadow in the far angle of that corner, where the two walls met and the light reached least effectively, did not behave the way shadows behave. It moved. Not cast movement, not the projected movement of light responding to something physical shifting elsewhere in the room. Independent movement, a gathering and releasing of darkness in that right angle of the walls, a slow and deliberate compression and expansion of shadow that had its own rhythm, its own intention, completely dissociated from any light source in the room. It breathed. The shadow in that corner breathed. Once. Slowly. And I felt the temperature in the room drop 2 degrees, a change so specific and so immediate that I looked at my own arms and watched the hair on them rise. And then it was just a corner again. Walls and baseboards and the ordinary shadow geometry of a lamplit room. Bailey stood up, walked to the fireplace, turned 3 times, and lay down in her spot with a sigh so complete and so exhausted that it sounded like something being put down after a very long time of carrying it. She never growled at that corner again. Not once in the 8 months since. She avoids it still, with a consistent and deliberate spatial awareness that only I would notice after 6 years of knowing her movement patterns in that room. She does not go within 4 feet of it. She routes around it when she crosses the room, adding the few extra steps it requires without apparent thought, as though the 4-foot boundary is simply geography to her now. A fact of the room. Something present. I have not moved the lamp or the chair. I have not done anything to the corner. It looks exactly as it has always looked in any light I put on it. But I do not sit in the reading chair anymore. I do not stand in that corner. I give it the same wide berth Bailey gives it, and I try not to think too carefully about what she saw for 8 evenings that required 40 minutes of warning, and then 1 evening of silence before it resolved into this. This permanent, quiet, spatial accommodation we have both made around something we are no longer being warned about. Something that is simply here now. Something that found its corner and stayed. The thing that keeps me awake some nights. The thing that surfaces in the quiet hours with the particular persistence of an unanswered question. Is this. Bailey growled for 8 days before she stopped. 8 days of warning. 8 days of that deep, grieving, mechanical sound. 8 days of trying to communicate across the gap between her understanding and mine. And I wonder, with a frequency I would prefer not to admit, whether she stopped because whatever was in that corner became familiar enough to tolerate, became a known quantity, a presence she had cataloged and filed and made her adjustments around, or whether she stopped because whatever was there had noticed by then that she wasn't going to stop it, that the warning had been given and not acted upon, that the person sitting on the couch had looked at the corner and stayed in the house, that we had, in our failure to leave, offered a kind of permission, that Bailey went quiet not because the danger had settled into something manageable, but because it was already too late to warn me about. If you've ever watched an animal react to something that you could not see, something that your own senses couldn't confirm, but that the animal's certainty made impossible to dismiss, I want you to describe exactly what you saw in the comments. How long it lasted, whether it stopped on its own, whether you ever understood what they were seeing. And if you want more stories from people who learned about the things sharing their space from the only witness brave enough to say something, subscribe to Campfire Nightmares, because animals know. They have always known. And the most terrifying moment of any story like this isn't when they start warning you. It's when they go quiet.